So I thought it'd be kind of fun to learn about some of that stuff and make a video about both the historical aspect of things, like how much did they know about birth control in the Regency era, and also just the general lessons that we can apply to our lives today. And so here we go. This is Dr. Karen Tang. I'm a gynecologist, and I'm here to talk to you about my thoughts on Bridgerton. I had a lot of thoughts. So like all of you, I binge watched Bridgerton on Netflix in like 3 days. I'm a big fan of historical dramas, so I was going to watch it even before I knew about all the sex stuff. So if there's a scandal, if there's a ball, an empire waste, I was going to watch it no matter what. But as I was watching, I realized how applicable a lot of the things that they were talking about were for people today. Things like birth control, figuring out pregnancy, finding out how to have a healthy and satisfying sexual relationship with your partner. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to learn about some of that stuff and make a video about both the historical aspect of things, like how much did they know about birth control in the Regency era, and also just the general lessons that we can apply to our lives today. And so here we go. So one of the first things that might have struck you as you watch Bridgerton, I know is one of the first things I noticed, is that it seemed like nobody knew how babies were made. Penelope and Eloise seemed to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how one became with child, and Daphne definitely didn't know. Obviously, it was a major plot point until her lady's maid explained it to her. There was a little bit of laughing on my part, being like, oh, nobody seems to know how babies are made. But a lot of that is still true today. I still definitely have patients who don't fully understand how conception works. I used to give lectures to college students on sex ed and birth control, and every semester I would get the question, can you get pregnant through oral sex? You can't. A lot of parts of the US, sex education may be abstinence only, meaning that they don't actually talk about how birth control works, how conception works, and so people may also not get that information in talking with their parents. And so we definitely still have today people either becoming pregnant because they didn't realize that they could, or having trouble conceiving because they don't have all the information they need about how pregnancy works. So in a major plot point, Daphne doesn't realize that ejaculation is necessary to become pregnant. So the Duke is using the withdrawal method, or pulling out, to prevent pregnancy. So I actually had a related case when I was a resident years and years ago. A couple came in for an infertility evaluation, and it turns out that he had never ejaculated before. They came from a very strict religious community, had never learned about sex ed, had not realized, what it took to become pregnant. So they literally had the same situation where they didn't realize that that was a necessary part of becoming pregnant. So a related question I had was, what type of birth control did they know about and use back then? So there's obviously not a ton of research on this. We know a little bit about birth control throughout the ages. And in fact, withdrawal method has been actually used for hundreds of years. And it's mentioned in the Bible. There was a man named Onan who uses this technique, and therefore onanism is another word for withdrawal. Condoms have also been around for hundreds of years. In fact, they were portrayed even in ancient Egyptian art. An intact condom dating from the 1600s was actually discovered, and Casanova, who's a famous seducer in Italy in the 1700s, was also portrayed as using them. So they definitely knew of their existence in the Regency era, though how often people were using them, I'm not sure. There was also the concept of placing things into the vagina, like pessaries or objects, things like lemon or different materials, to try and prevent pregnancy. I also wanted to talk about the scene where Marina tries to end her pregnancy by making some sort of a tea, like, using stuff she finds in the kitchen to induce a miscarriage or an abortion. And on the surface, it would seem, oh my gosh, that's so ridiculous. Like, why would she ever think that that would work? But sadly, even today, there is this sort of idea that people talk about on TikTok or social media of ways to induce an abortion or a miscarriage at home using stuff that you can mix into like a drink or a tea. So obviously that's super dangerous. There's definitely no safe way to induce an abortion or miscarriage at home. Either you can get really sick, or you can bleed, or it just wouldn't be effective, and then you would continue to be pregnant as Marina was. So obviously, please don't try anything like that at home. Incredibly dangerous. If you find that you're pregnant and you don't want to be pregnant, please see your gynecologist or go to Planned Parenthood and talk about different options that are safe. Something that's really unusual about Bridgerton, definitely compared to other period dramas, but even compared to other TV shows, is the idea that it portrays female sexual pleasure. Orgasm, masturbation, a woman having oral sex performed on her. These are almost never shown on TV shows, and it's a little sad because those are a normal part of a healthy sex life. So I really give the showrunners credit for this, because too often in TV shows, sex is used as almost like a negative psychological force. For instance, in Game of Thrones, where they were accused of repeatedly using things like rape as a plot point, showing how, psychologically, traumatized the women were, or how it hardened them. It is very unusual to show just like a very positive, healthy sexual relationship. So I do give them credit. I thought that was neat to see on TV. So Obviously, there is a controversial scene which calls into question the definition of things like rape and sexual assault. And that's, of course, after Daphne learns about withdrawal and that the Duke has been using withdrawal without her knowledge to prevent her from getting pregnant. So in the same scene, she's on top and she does not allow him to withdraw, knowing that he doesn't want a child. And, it seems like is forcing him to continue sexual activity when he, is trying to say no. In my mind, anytime someone of any gender is being forced to have sexual activity without their consent, if they're trying to say no, then it's sexual assault. I'm not an attorney. I don't have the legal definition, but it seems pretty, self-explanatory. Even if it starts as consensual, if it ends with someone wanting to stop, trying to say no, and the other person doesn't listen, then that's what it is. And so I do wish that they had kind of gone into that a little bit more. Like they seem to kind of give Daphne a pass a little bit because she's a woman. That is something I wish that they had kind of delved into a little bit more, because obviously it was, a scene that really triggered people who had a history of, sexual violence or sexual assault. And it seemed like they sort of just kind of let it go and they were happy again. It did seem like in the media and in online discussion about that scene that people were debating and discussing these issues. And so that is good. I do hope that people, continue to have a conversation about this because obviously it's such an important topic. The last thing I wanted to talk about were the childbirth scenes in Bridgerton. Were they accurate? Not really. I'm not an obstetrician, which is somebody who takes care of women in pregnancy and childbirth, but I trained in it and I have friends who are OBs. Everyone who I asked about their thoughts on Bridgerton, the universal response was that the childbirth scenes were so bad. And that's just the nature of childbirth scenes in TV shows and movies. They're not making a documentary. They're just trying to show the drama of it. But it was pretty funny how in the scene where the Duke is being born, his mom goes from being completely fine to dead in 10 seconds. Granted, OB emergencies can happen very quickly, like hemorrhages, but not quite that quickly. And in that scene too, the mother hadn't even really bled very much, and the OB was like, there's nothing to do. Something you might not notice necessarily unless you, knew about labor and delivery and worked in that field is that in that scene, he calls for forceps, which is an instrument that's used to deliver the baby's head. But at that point, the baby had already started crying, so obviously the head is already out. And so a lot of OBs I know really laughed at that part. Like I said, most people probably didn't even notice that, but we all thought that was funny. So I hope you enjoyed this gynecologist take on Bridgerton. I apologize for my low-tech approach to this. I don't know how to embed the video so I can react to it. I didn't want to get into copyright infringement issues, but I had a great time. If you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for other things to react to or topics you want to see covered in the future, just drop them in the comments. Hit like and subscribe and all the other stuff you're supposed to do for YouTube. I wanted to give a shout out to Mama Dr. Jones, who is the OG gynecologist on YouTube and a friend of mine on social media. She's been really encouraging and helpful as I've been trying to figure out how to start a YouTube channel. I am not even close to being anywhere near as good as she is, but I'm trying and I think it's really fun. So hopefully I'll be able to provide content for you guys that is interesting, useful, educational. So thank you so much for spending time with me today and hope to see you again soon. Bye.